Welcome back to the Real Estate 401k show. I'm your host, Mike Weinstein, alongside Justin Frederick and the sweaty Ryan Gerdes.
Sweaty balls?
Sweaty balls.
Sweaty balls. No, it was like, all right, so what happened was...
I wasn't really asking. I was just stating the fact.
So no, like we had to like run one of our vehicles over to the mechanic, and like it was just one of those mornings. Like then the pool started acting up, so I was out there with my son, and then I was like, all right, gotta go take a shower and get ready to head into studio. And then I literally jump in the shower, and then my wife comes in. She goes, "You need to verify your bank information because we had to, I don't know, make a payment or put her on." And so like I'm literally in the shower, like on the phone with speaker, like going over all this crap, and then and I was like, all right, this is putting me even more behind. And then like another phone call, and it was just one of those types of like comedy of just bullshit events. You know what I mean?
Go ahead.
So then I like raced, and I didn't even really get to towel off all the way. Then I was like, all right, throw on some clothes and run into studio. And so I'm like, dude, I probably should have toweled off a little bit better.
You want to use my coat? Yeah, I guess Justin. I guess moving forward, when you called Justin, or called Ryan, like, where are you at right now?
Are you in the shower?
Are you in this shower right now, or the weight loss chamber?
Yeah. Both are viable options.
All righty. Well, today we want to talk about this episode is specifically for sellers, and we're going to talk about money draining mistakes that sellers oftentimes make when they put their house on the market. And if you're thinking about putting your house on the market and you have questions about it, all you got to do is text the word sale to 623-AZ-RECON. That's sale to 623-AZ-RECON. I think one of the first ones, and I know, Justin, you've seen a lot of, well, we've all seen closing statements, but a lot of sellers, they don't understand like the seller costs involved, the things that go into financially selling your home. You owe $250,000 and you sell it for $500,000, and you factor in commissions, and people get that, but they don't necessarily understand like all the fees involved in really budgeting it so you don't have that sticker shock.
Mm-hmm. I think it's synonymous with buyers too. A lot of them just aren't taking into account the fact that, think about even the time. I don't even know what the numbers are, but I would say that the first-time home buyer is probably looking at anywhere between 10 and 15 homes before they make a purchase, and that's time out of family, time out from work. It's gas in the car, and it's all these little things, and you're like, oh well, that's kind of inconsequential. But then you start adding it up, and you're like, holy shit! Like it took us some doing and some money in order to just get this thing under contract, and then you have inspections, and then you have appraisals, and then you have, of course, your closing costs, and then we'll talk a little bit more about those as we move on. But I just think that people just kind of take a lot of these things at face value without really putting thought into all the extraneous finances that go into effect. And there's even a couple of things on here that I think we're missing that I'll chime in on.
Yeah, and I think some of them, sellers don't understand that, especially if the home's vacant, they've got to stage the home properly. Even if it's occupied, you need to declutter, and sometimes you might even need to get some sort of storage unit. Worth it to store all the crap and all the clutter. Paying for a portion of the closing costs. Oftentimes, Justin, buyers are asking for sellers for seller concessions, and then moving. I don't know how many times sellers go, "Oh, wait a minute, I gotta move." And who's going to move all that stuff? And hence why I'm 53 and I still don't own a truck.
I do, and I love it, but it's you and I are just different cats.
How often do you get asked to move these days?
I nip that in the bud before they even ask. Yeah. Like this is not my job.
I still get asked quite a bit.
Oh, do you?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
I think that they know the sad truth before they even ask the question. So
at this point, I'm like, you can borrow my truck and my trailer, but
you let them borrow your truck and your trailer?
I will.
Yeah, I'd rather give them a few bucks to go rent a U-Haul.
Yeah. Well, his truck right now is kind of dangerous. It's only got one tail light, so
not mine.
Justin's.
I got it fixed, but I'm parked out front today. So
yeah. So what are some of the seller costs that you're seeing on these statements, and what are how should sellers financially be prepared to preparing expenses and costs and so forth.
So I think one of the things that a lot of agents forget to prepare their sellers with is the cost of concessions. I feel like it's very frequent these days, and I feel like a lot of times we get these contracts in with concessions, and then these sellers don't realize that those concessions actually come out of their pocket. So definitely need to consider that into the offers that you receive. But title costs, I mean, anywhere from what we go 1.5%. That's typically what I use, is about 1.5% for title costs on the purchase price of the home. And then we're considering the HOA fees. I don't think a lot of people look at the HOA fees. Now, typically in Arizona, they're only obligated as a seller to pay for the this Arizona disclosure.
Disclosure must be paid by the seller.
Yeah,
a buyer cannot disclose something to themselves.
Right. But a lot of times we get 50-50 on all the HOA fees, and again, they're not considering that into all of their fees, and that's deducting from their net profits.
Yeah, and I think, Ryan, too, I like to categorize them. There's two sets of fees that you got to take into account. There are the litany of fees that Justin was alluding to, things that are going to come off basically the price of the home, your gross, profits. It's going to come from that. But then there's also just the out-of-pocket ones. Sometimes we take a look at, we're selling our home and we're going to net $200,000, but I got to pay this fee and that fee. And sometimes we look at it as, funny money. It's not real tangible money to us yet. But then I think a lot of sellers don't understand, like, getting your house ready to sell, you're having to cough up some money.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And you're probably doing a little bit more maintenance. I mean, we definitely have plenty of sellers that have just stayed on top of their stuff. And so I've walked into a number of different places where I'm like, hey, don't touch anything. You guys are doing a great job. Just, stay the course, and someone's going to walk in here. And to me, that's one of the biggest selling factors is I can go over to a buyer and I can say, hey, look, they didn't do anything to this house in order to sell it. This is just how they live. So there's no lipstick on a pig anywhere here. They've been taking care of this thing, and this thing is cancer free. So, move forward with confidence.
All right. If you'd like some more information about, the costs involved in selling a home, the process of selling a home, all you got to do is text the word sell to 623-AZ-RECON. That's sell to 623-AZ-RECON. The next one, Ryan, is it's just one of the things that we oftentimes have to battle with sellers. One is obviously pricing the house right when you hit the market, but oftentimes sellers think their home is worth more than it really is, and sometimes they just ignore the data, because we're coming in with the data. Our educated opinion is based on the data, based on what we're seeing, but then the house sits on the market for a variety of different reasons. And I think one of the biggest mistakes and one of the costly mistakes sellers make is not knowing when to lower the price, especially if it's a vacant home. Every month it sits vacant, you're paying for a mortgage, you're paying for HOA, taxes, and things like that.
You're going to learn a lot just from the days on market and the history of your comparables. I spend just as much time learning about the evolution of the sale of a property as I do the actual cost or the actual sales price, if you will. So if I see a property that's sat on the market and it's, say it's $1 million property, and it's sat on the market for a month and everything else is selling within 2 weeks, then the market has spoken. Now, one thing that every good agent's going to do is they're going to reach out to the buyer's agent and say, hey, I'd love to get some feedback. And they're going to say, oh, well, they liked the kitchen, they liked the view, but they hated the floor. They hated the floor plan. They needed an extra bedroom, or they needed an extra garage space. And then a lot of times listing agents will just let them stop right there and say, okay, I'm going to take it at face value. There's much more being said, right? Like, if there's actual issues with the property as far as floor plan or location or something like that, they probably wouldn't have gone and looked at the property in the first place, right? So they went and looked at it for a reason. And what they're really telling you is, we're not seeing the value there. you're priced out. And so good listing agents will say, well, you know what, humor me. If you were to list this property, what would you list it for? Because we all have a very difficult time overcoming that obstacle as a seller, because we always think that, oh, you know, this house over here sold for $1 million, mine should sell for $1 million too. When there's probably a lot of variables or different upgrades that were done to that $1 million one, making yours worth more like $950. And the when is a very important question, but how much as well.
Yeah.
I see so many people saying, "Oh, well, we lowered our price by $5,000, you know, $1 million to $950 or to $995," and I'm like, "What the hell is that doing for you?" Right? Because consumers, they shop and they buy property in certain matrices. So you're not going to reach a new pool of buyers by going from $1 million to $995. You might reach a new pool at $975, but more likely at $950. So when you are putting together your strategy for pricing and you're wanting to test the market, then go into it knowing, okay, your typical days on market are going to be X. And if you reach X and haven't sold, you need to lower your price and you need to find a new pool of buyers. Where is that next pool? And then lower your price accordingly.
Yeah, and I think for me on that, and it kind of gets into our next point, because and it's not vetting agents properly, or I'll just combine them all, not vetting agents properly or trying to sell your house without an agent. Oftentimes a seller does not, because it's not their job to understand the market and understand truly what the comparables are saying and what days on market's saying and really what's going on. And when you are pricing a home, there's a lot of strategy and a lot of data analytics that goes into it. But you also just can't assume that somebody has a real estate license and they know what they're doing as well.
It means that they passed a test.
You know, I bought a house, as you guys know, last year in Queen Creek, and I picked up the house for $425,000. And I knew for a fact, and I'm not a smart man, but I knew for a fact this thing was worth about $490, $495, and that it would appraise at that. And the appraisal came in at $495. And so this seller was, basing, everything on the advice of his agent, and they went way under. And in my opinion, that seller lost, $75,000. So a lot goes into vetting agents and not making the mistake of trying to sell your house on your own, because that really is part of it when it comes down to pricing and then lowering the price when the time comes.
So we used to do home tours. My team used to do home tours before COVID. And
hold on, please, Ryan, do not, whatever you do not take your van to Alaska. We're going to do the pub crawl home tours thing, and I mean I'm
pass.
Yeah. So we used to say you should have 5 showings and 1 offer per week if the house is priced right. Do you guys feel like that's still accurate? I mean, in this market, because it's definitely a different market than it was then.
It depends, right? I mean, if you have, like right now, our biggest sweet spot is between 400 and 700,000. Yeah. So if you're in that sweet spot, then absolutely, that those stats are correct. Once you go above that 700,000 to about $1 million,
you need a special
then
buyer.
It's more like 1 out of 7, and then once you get above 2 million, it's more like 1 out of 10, 1 out of 15.
Do you still want to have that many showings if you're 700 plus? You want to see 5 showings a week?
No.
Okay.
No.
But I would say this though, if it's under $1 million and you're 2 weeks into it and you haven't had 1 showing, I think there's a problem.
Yeah,
for sure.
Okay.
100%. So yeah, again, it's just chasing the numbers and seeing what it's doing. We, I think, what was it, like 2 weeks ago, we offered to all of our listeners that data, and it's easy to see where the bulk of the market is right now. And so if there's if you're one of those properties that are in the high percentage of what is selling at that time, you should expect a good amount of activity per showing. So it's just going to all be relative.
Yeah, I don't know if I would agree that you should have, 5 showings and at least one offer because there could be some extenuating circumstances. It could be flat out you're getting the showings, but the house isn't showing well, right? And that just becomes another issue, not necessarily price. But, anyways, if you're looking to sell your home and want some more information, all you got to do is text the word sell to 623 AZ Recon. That's sell to 623 AZ Recon. Before I let you boys go, I want to expound a little bit more on this temptation for sellers to sell without an agent. And I think obviously the temptation is always money. If I do a for sale by owner, I am going to save on having to pay realtor fees and whatever that number is, whether you think as a seller it's 4 or 5 or 6%, you're doing the math and you're wanting to save it. But going back to, you better understand what's going on in your neighborhood. You just can't take a look at Zillow and say, well, this house sold for this, because even though you might be saving in paying realtor fees, you might end up losing more, especially if you underprice it. If you overprice it and now you're making 1 or 2 mortgages, now you're really hurting yourself. And then obviously when it comes down to then just all the negotiations that are involved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you have 45 plus years experience and you know exactly what to do and you don't have a real estate license, then don't hire us. So if you know exactly what to do, then by all means. But you're still not going to have the bandwidth. You're still not going to have the reach. It is our job to make sure that we are doing whatever that is needed by you in order to accomplish what you want to accomplish. Now, the other thing that we think about all the time here is just money. Sometimes it's time. Yeah. Right? Like, I can't tell you how many times we've had clients that they find this amazing opportunity, but in order to jump on it, they need to liquidate one of their assets or one of their homes ASAP. And then they're like, oh, well, what if I just do it FSBO, save the, whatever, percentage off of what the real estate professional costs are. And then they can't get it sold, right? Or can't get it sold in time. So there's a lot more to it. And then, one of the things on here I just wanted to throw out on selling costs. The biggest number that I see that people don't account for is transitional costs. And that means they are homeless. If you're selling a property that you're living in to buy another property that you want to live in, and you need a short-term rental or Airbnb for a month, those numbers get high fast, especially if you're trying to sell during season. So it's a double-edged sword. You're selling at high season and where you're getting the most money and the fastest. And then you have a month or maybe even 2 before your new home's done being built or you close escrow on the next one, and you're paying $1,000 a day sometimes. It can get really, really steep, really, really quick. And then all of a sudden you're like, man, I didn't account for this eating into my proceeds. And so that's one of those selling costs that I see that most people do not budget for. Now, we do have a lot of post and prepossessions that happen out there. Absolutely happens all the time. But sometimes a buyer can be stubborn and say, no, look, when I close, no one's living in this place but me. And that's just a reality that sometimes they have to deal with.
All right, if you are thinking about selling your home, you have questions about selling your home and the costs involved in the process and the steps, and more importantly, how to do it right, we'd love to have that conversation with you. All you got to do is text the word sale to 623 AZ Recon. That's sale to 623 AZ Recon.